today I thought I would give a tribute to my grandmother, Granny, as I call her. Truth is stranger than fiction. I think you've heard that said many times, and I think that it is very, very true. And it's absolutely true for the story of my grandmother. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was born in Indonesia in 1896. I don't know if you know how many islands there are in Indonesia. There are about 18,000 islands in the largest archipelago nation in the world. Of these 18,000, about 6,000 are inhabited. Granny was born, more specifically, on the small island of Belitung, which is an island on the east of Sumatra in the Java Sea. She was of Chinese origin, and her name was Li Samnga. Li, of course, in the Chinese tradition, the first name is always the surname. So she was a Li, and Samnga was her name. She never went to school because school was only for the boys. When she was a young woman, she left Indonesia with her brother and sister. And I understand from a cousin of mine who told me this, because I never knew what was the reason for her leaving Indonesia, was that her father, that is Granny's father, wanted the best for his children, and he had done sort of mining work during his life, and he had contacts in Malaya at that time. It wasn't Malaysia, it was Malaya, and in some mining project. And he had contacts, and he thought that his children would be better off in that land rather than just staying on the small island of Belitung. So Granny left for Malaya to the state of Pahang, which is on the east coast of Malaysia, of Peninsular Malaya. There, she met Thomas Lawther, who was an Australian and a mill manager of a big tin mine with lots of expatriates working there. Over the years, they had 10 children, 4 boys followed by 6 girls. In 1939, the start of the Second World War happened, of course, and Thomas was sent to Singapore for treatment for his lymphoma. And unfortunately, he died there in 1939. That was the beginning of the Second World War. That left Granny all alone with 6 girls. The 3 older boys had been sent to Singapore to study and later find work. But the youngest boy hung around for a bit, and then later on became a guerrilla fighting the Japanese in the Malayan jungle. Granny was a Buddhist at that time, according to what she had been brought up as. The Japanese invaded Malaya in December 1941. Granny and the 6 girls moved to a smaller home in a village setting quite close to the Malayan jungle. There they remained quite safe and secluded till some informers told on them. And that was in March 1945. The family were regarded as enemy aliens because their father was Australian. They were gathered up by the Japanese and taken by truck to a town in another state where they spent, not sure whether it was one night or a few nights in jail there. They were then put in an open-air train, excuse me, train carriage, and they didn't know where they were going or what their fate was. Their destination turned out to be Singapore, where they were interned at the Sime Road civilian internment camp there. They later met their three brothers there. And incidentally, that was where also my mother met my father, who had been arrested and taken by train from Penang to Singapore. Fortunately, they only stayed in this civilian internment camp for about 6 months before the liberation in September of that year, 1945. Granny and the girls decided to stay on in Singapore and not return to Malaya. Granny was a woman of strength. She had to be during that time. She asked her children to teach her to read and write, and was able to accomplish that to a certain degree. She had an auntie in Singapore who introduced her to the Christian faith, and she became a Methodist. After some years, she attended an evangelistic campaign run by a pastor, Datamore. I'm not sure if some of you older ones here would remember his name. I'm not sure whether he's Australian or American. Yes, Cheryl's nodding, American, I think. And she heard about the Sabbath. So she was convicted about the Sabbath, and she left the Methodist Church and became a Seventh-day Adventist. She must have been very happy to know that there was an Indonesian or Malay-speaking Seventh-day Adventist church in Singapore, which she joined and became an active member. Granny introduced me to the Seventh-day Adventist church and is instrumental in me becoming a Seventh-day Adventist. Later, Mum joined the church too. Granny passed away in 1981 at the age of 85. She had a hard life, but was always hospitable and kind. In whatever religion she had, she found herself, she was fervent, from Buddhist to Methodist to Seventh-day Adventist. Her favorite hymn, I remember, was Trust and Obey, the old hymn. When we walk with the Lord in the light of his word, what a glory he sheds on our way. When we do his good will, he abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. I have one photo. It's not a good photo. Granny is closing her eyes, and I'm not very happy at my photo being taken. I was probably about 12 or 13, and that was at the gates of the church there, the Malay-speaking church, Indonesian-speaking church, and Granny must have been about 70 there. So happy Mother's Day. And if you're a grandmother or great-grandmother, and there are a few in this congregation, have a happy day.